our last and final South American country. So we've done this before. If Latin America was a family, you got the main characters like Mexico, who's like the kingpin big boss with his Central American sidekicks. Colombia is like the popular uncle who does all the talking. Peru is in the kitchen making the best food while Ecuador is reading a book quietly. Argentina and Uruguay are sipping wine, looking all bougie, but between them, only Uruguay actually is rich. DR and PR are fighting, but then they make up. Cuba is just watching the fight. Bolivia and Paraguay are not speaking Spanish, while Chile is speaking Spanish, but no one can understand them. And then we get to Venezuela, Colombia's fraternal twin sister, the hot girl with problems of Latin America. Welcome to Venezuela.
It's time to learn geography now!
Hey everybody, I'm your host Barbs. Get your Geography Now merch like this Geography Now shirt or this Geography Now drawstring bag at geographynow.com. Not selling out if it's your brand. Oh, and what's this? You can also get a Geography Now figurine at figgyme.com. It's me in figurine form. He's been on quite a few adventures. If you can tell, I broke his neck and his head fell off. I need a new one. I'm gonna have to order it at figgyme.com. I really wanted to visit Venezuela to get on-location footage for this episode, but unfortunately the visa process takes a lot longer for American citizens. Like, I would have to go to Mexico to get the visa, and it's a complicated process. So if I can't go to Venezuela, the best thing to do is bring Venezuela to me. And the best way to do that is to have a Venezuelan help me co-host this episode. And I could not think of anyone better than this person. Some of you guys already know her. Say hi to Joanna Hausman.
Oh my God, it's me. Venezuela.
How did we meet each other?
YouTube. I saw your videos. You saw my videos?
I saw you. I think I saw you first, actually. I think I saw you on Flama.
Yes.
And you did all the accents of the Spanish world, or Spanish-speaking world. And
yeah, and now we're here.
It was like 5 years ago. Would you like to be in the Venezuela episode? We kept the promise. We kept the promise. We kept the promise. Joanna, just quickly, anything you want to say to your fellow Venezuelans out there?
Vamos a darle. Vamos a darle esta vaina.
Vamos a darle.
Vamos a darle esta vaina.
We'll explain that in a bit.
Yeah. So first off, most people will say Venezuela got its name from the Italian verb Veneziola, which was what the navigator Amerigo Vespucci called it when he saw stilt houses of the natives, and it reminded him of Venice.
From there, Venezuela was colonized by the Spanish, and long story short, independence, followed by the 19th century, the whole Simón Bolívar thing. We talked about it many
Everyone
times.
talks about it. Actually, for many in Venezuela, though, Francisco de Miranda might be considered a more notable key figure for Venezuelan independence. His name is even on the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. I don't want to brag.
True fact. After a bunch of interesting chapters, even one where they formed a big-ass Megatron country called Gran Colombia with Colombia, Ecuador, and Panama, they eventually became the Venezuela that we know today.
Let's find it on the globe now in the motion graphic, shall we? I love motion graphic. It's the best type of graphic, the motion one.
First of all, Venezuela is located on the northern part of the South American continent. It has a coast mostly on the Caribbean Sea that holds somewhere around 70 or so islands and islets. Fun side note, see this little peninsula here? It's the site of the first place Christopher Columbus set foot on in the South American continent. The country is divided into 23 states, each with their own flag, as well as federal dependencies, which are collectively the 70 or so islands off the coast that act as one unit, and one capital district for the capital, Caracas. Caracas is not only the largest city, but it also has the busiest airport, Simón Bolívar International, which is kind of inconveniently located across an entire mountain pass from the actual city of Caracas, but hey, it is what it is. From there, the second and third largest cities are Maracaibo and Valencia. However, the second and third busiest airports are Barcelona and Maracaibo. Caracas, Maracaibo, and Valencia are the only three cities with a city metro rail. Otherwise, the country has a national rail system with some lines operating passenger cars, others solely for freight and transport. Whereas roadways extend to all parts of the country. However, keep in mind, much of the country south of the Orinoco River is comprised of sparsely inhabited rainforests and national parks with no road access, and certain communities in these areas are only accessible by riverboat or bush plane. Some anomalies, see this weird guy right here? It's called the Paraguaná Peninsula, and technically it's classified as a tide island. As you can see, it's connected by a very narrow isthmus or tombolo called Médanos, which is a skinny, marshy sandbank only about half a mile or 1.2 kilometers wide. Nonetheless, some people just call this peninsula Cora Island. If you go to the northwestern border with Colombia, it's kind of quirky because Venezuela really doesn't want to share the eponymously named Gulf of Venezuela. Upon agreements, Venezuela would keep everything along the coast up to the Cocinetas Lagoon. That meant that they would have a super narrow border on the La Guajira Peninsula, sometimes reaching only about 2 miles wide at its narrowest. And finally, Venezuela has a dispute with Guyana over the Essequibo region, or as the Venezuelans call it, Guiana Essequiba. This entire area is claimed by Venezuela, even though it is de facto administered by the country of Guyana, and makes up about 2 2/3 of everything Guyana claims is theirs. This is a complicated one. We'll explain more about it later.
By the way, yeah, Caracas really loves itself. So there's this saying, Venezuela es Caracas, el resto es Monteculebra.
Does that mean like everybody pretty much outside of Caracas doesn't like Caracas or they hate Caracas?
I mean, it's not that they hate Caracas, but I think that Caracas thinks that they're like la última Coca-Cola del desierto, which means like the last Coca-Cola in the desert.
It's a big city complex. Like every country has one.
Yes, and Caracas for sure.
Yeah, lots of stuff going on regionally in Venezuela, which means let's jump back to the complicated topic, the Essequibo dispute. What is this whole thing and why is it even a thing?
Well, it has a lot of layers to it, but basically it goes back to the 1899 Arbitral Award, which established the borders between Venezuela and British Guiana, which is now Guyana.
Oh, that whole thing was just an Anglo-Russian conspiracy. Plus, it didn't count because the USA was standing in as our representative.
Okay, yeah, but we both asked the USA and Russia to step in and Russia to be the judge.
It doesn't matter because our Constitution already stated that our land pertains to those claimed by the Captaincy General of Venezuela from 1777.
Yeah, and that claim also included the other lands that are now part of Colombia and Brazil, but you relinquished those claims, so why not this one?
Guys, can I say something?
No!
Well, technically, I was the first outsider to colonize this area.
Oh, shut up!
Wait, so okay, let me get this straight. Both of you were once under the colonial powers of Spain and Great Britain, right?
Right.
And both of you inevitably decided you no longer wanted to be ruled by your former colonial rulers.
Right.
But when it comes to this area, you want to claim legitimacy to the colonial claimed borders?
Right.
Okay, carry on.
This inevitably led to the Geneva Agreement in 1966, which stated that the two sides would try to work on something, but if no resolution was settled upon, by default the region would remain under administration of the government of Guyana until one was made.
And so far, none has been made.
At the end of the day, if you ask most Venezuelans, they'll probably say something like, yeah, okay, I guess it should be ours. I mean, we even have a saying, El sol de Venezuela nace en el Essequibo, Venezuela's sun rises from the Essequibo, but like, it's just not the most important thing on our minds daily, you know what I mean? There's other problems.
Yeah, and it's hard because today there's like generations of everybody that's lived there. They've been English-speaking Guyanese people, so it's like, what now? What do you want to do? Do you seriously want to consider invading and reconquering it, or what? Like, because that's going to open up a whole other new thing. Is it worth it? I don't know.
But of course, the government kind of conveniently brings it up as a big deal whenever some kind of campaign comes along to create some kind of external issue to deflect from the domestic problems. Oh, wow, I wonder where we've seen that before.
Malvinas! In any case, Venezuela has always kind of had unique, confusing, quirky parts throughout its history.
Oh my God, just like my childhood. For example, it has the very first city in South America founded by Europeans, New Cadiz, and it was destroyed by a hurricane.
Also in Venezuela, you can find the site of the short-lived largest German colony in the Americas. That was a weird one.
Yeah. And for over 50 years, we used our own half-hour offset time zone at UTC minus 430. But then they switched it back again in 2009, but then back again to UTC 4 in 2016. It literally made watching TV impossible.
There's so much to the story of Venezuela and its formation as a country. It's crazy.
And another thing that's crazy is the list of notable places you can check out if you are ever lucky enough to visit Venezuela. And with that, let's have Kat explain it. Take it away, Kat.
Hey everyone, hola que tal, me llamo Katy, and I'm going to tell you about some of the top sites you can see in Venezuela. You'll probably start off in the capital, Distrito Federal, also known as Caracas. So if that's the case, maybe start with Bolivar Square and the National Panteon of Venezuela in Old Town Caracas. The Panteon has the grave of our patriot father, Simón Bolívar. The house Simón Bolívar grew up in is also a museum now. The cable car located in El Cerro del Ávila and the Galipán town, a place surrounded by pure Yaire landscape.
What is a yaire?
Como una vista bella, like a beautiful scenery. Outside of Caracas, there's quite a bit too. Like the city of Coro, the first city created by the Spanish and its colonial building. Colonia Toal, with its German architecture and yummy locally grown strawberries with whipped cream. So good. One time I went and there's a monkey behind where we ordered food, and it was the trippiest thing ever because I've never seen a monkey.
And it's like a German town.
It's so cool. Temple of Virgen de Coromoto. We also have the monument of Our Lady of Peace, the tallest Mary statue in the world. Everyone knows Los Roques Archipelago. Isla La Tortuga and Isla Margarita, some of the best beach resorts are there. And yes, Venezuela does have some theme parks you can check out, como Parque Diverland, Montaña de los Sueños, Aquaventura Park, Parque Temático Armando de Ron, which by the way has a huge iguana. And lastly, we have Los Aleros, which is a historical theme park. It has old-style Venezuelan houses. La Gran Gran Sabana, and los tipuis, which some say are giant trees that reach to the heavens cut by the gods. That's why they look like tree trunks. We'll talk about the tipuis later on in the episode. And of course, the #1 landmark, top tourist site, Canaima, where you can go to Angel Falls, the highest and uninterrupted waterfall in the world, nearly 1 kilometer high. So there you have it, guys. Venezuela is truly a treasure trove of breathtaking sights. There's something here for everyone. Hasta luego.
By the way, she's Enoch's fiance, so she's taken. Heads up. See you guys later.
Thank you, Kat. Yes, Venezuela is loaded with natural beauty, and much of it is very well preserved.
Luckily for you, we are now going to discuss that in the next segment. There's a song everyone in Venezuela knows that's called Venezuela. That's a very appropriate name. The lyrics pretty much describe the land. Soy desierto, selva, nieve y volcán. I'm desert, jungle, snow, and volcano.
But Venezuela takes its natural diversity to a whole new level, and suddenly you have strange ecoregions that are found nowhere else on Earth.
But first, let's discuss the physical makeup in the motion graphic, shall we?
First of all, the country has 5 main physical regions. From the west, you have the Maracaibo lowlands, which has the largest lake of the country, Lake Maracaibo, which is more like a brackish water lagoon as it has a small, narrow, open strait that connects to the Caribbean Sea. All these lowlands are sandwiched between the Perijá and Merida mountain ranges, which is essentially the beginning of the Andes Mountains. In the Merida range, you can find the tallest peak of the country, Pico Bolivar, nearly 5,000 meters high. Just east of that, along the north coast, you have the Venezuela coastal range, which has the largest closed-off natural lake, Lake Valencia. From there, the entire center of the country is a super flat region known as the Orinoco Basin, or the Los Llanos. This area is where most of the agriculture is concentrated, fed by the largest river, the Orinoco, and its tributaries emptying into the Atlantic at the Orinoco Delta. Here you can find the largest man-made lake, the Guri Reservoir. From there, the southern part of the country is covered in one of the most unique landscapes ever, the Guiana Highlands. This area is packed with the largest concentration of tepuis in all of South America. They are isolated, tropical, tabletop mountains with sharp vertical cliffs. These two are the largest ones area-wise. However, the most famous one is probably Aywan Tepui in the Bolivar state, which has the highest unobstructed waterfall in the world, Angel Falls, which is nearly 1 kilometer high.
So if there are two things that sum up the uniqueness of Venezuela, it would have to be the tepuis and the Maracaibo region.
So first off, tepuis, which means the house of the gods in the Pemon language, are some of the oldest rock formations on Earth and have some of the most unique endemic flora and fauna.
So think of it like this. The flat tops of the tepuis are isolated from the ground forest, which effectively makes them ecological islands. If you climb up to the top of them, it looks totally different from the ground below with different plant species.
Did you ever see the Pixar movie Up?
Yes, yes.
That was inspired off of the Angel Falls in the Tepuis region in Venezuela.
Then you have the very strange thing around the Lake Maracaibo region at the mouth of the Catatumbo River.
Dude, you have the Relámpago del Catatumbo, a weird atmospheric phenomenon that creates the most massive and concurrent thunderstorms in the world. On average, about 2/3 of the year can have lightning activity with up to 1.5 million strikes.
Many say that this is because the lake is situated in the narrow corridor of land between the tall mountains, which funnels cool mountain air mixing in with the vast, humid, swampy airs by the lake. It's the perfect conditions to make a perpetual storm.
Perpetual storm, that is the name of my memoir. In any case, there is so much more to Venezuela's land, resources, and how the country manages it all.
And with that, it's time for my triple shot of espresso break. And I don't know if you like espresso, Joanna, but we're going to do it anyway.
We're going to do it.
And that means Noah takes over the rest of this segment. Noah, take it away.
Take it away.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble. It's just me. All right, so let's discuss a very heavy and complex topic, Venezuelan resources and economy. First off, the #1 thing everyone correctly thinks of, petroleum. Discovered in the 1910s during the Juan Vicente Gomez 27-year-long dictatorship, and that's a whole other story. Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world. If you look at the hydrocarbon map, most of the oil is found in the Orinoco Belt in the East Venezuelan Basin, which extends offshore. And most of the rigs and wells are managed by the PDVSA, which is the world's 5th largest oil exporter. This means the government is in charge of a sector that contributes over 90% of all exports. That's a big deal. Of course, due to the heavily state-subsidized industry, this also means they have the least expensive petroleum sold publicly. As of 2023, it was about 2 cents per liter or about 8 cents per gallon. That's a good deal. So yeah, that was one of the only few commodities Venezuelans didn't have to worry about too much during the hyperinflation crisis. And since then, so many things have happened. Like in 2014, rationing programs began. Everything from food to utilities. Every Venezuelan remembers when they would get those clap ration boxes. In 2007, Corporal Elect was formed by merging 16 state-owned and private electric companies managed by a general in the army. This guy. And he announced that the electric companies would reset their debts with their users. Then the government tried to regulate food and basic needs with a biometric fingerprint system, but today it's only used in gas stations that have regulated super cheap prices. And see, that's the thing. Yes, other industries exist in Venezuela like mining, agriculture, and electronics, but they are not at a very sustainable level. And for the longest time, the country had been hyper-dependent on its oil wealth. There are so many factors that played into this whole thing, and there is no one single answer. It was so bad that people started weighing blocks of bolivars rather than counting them. Money became so undervalued that people would literally sell handicrafts made of the worthless bolivar banknotes that costed more than the paper currency. Government actions clearly had their effect. And one day it went too far. People will say the 2019 blackout was the last straw. And from then on, the country took a different path and unofficially dollarized itself. Now in Venezuela, everyone uses US dollars, not bolivars. And since then, in a weird way, things have kind of sort of leveled out a bit. People are able to safely walk the streets and live life somewhat normally now, even though the currency is not recognized. Well, clearly there is a story behind the financial crisis, but there is a beautiful, vibrant side to the nature. And with that, we move on to our animal correspondent, Caleb.
Hello, everybody. I am here.
We're done with the Uzbekistan episode, Caleb.
Oh. Venezuela! You know, sometimes when we do these episodes, we reach some countries that have very little wildlife. And sometimes we reach countries like Venezuela where there is an overwhelming avalanche of animal species and we don't know what to do with it. We don't have enough time to pack it into the episode, but we're gonna do what we can! Venezuela is categorized as one of the world's 17 mega diverse countries in the world, and they do very well maintaining their wildlife, as the country manages 43 national parks that cover about 22% of their country's landmass. They have all different landscapes ranging from the snow-topped mountains of the Sierra Nevada to the most famous one, Canaima, which, yes, has angel falls. In most of these parks, you can find over 8,000 species of mammals, reptiles, and birds, many of whom are endemic, like the national bird, the Venezuelan trupial. Look at that little guy with his little
His Glock.
His Glock. Gold and black feathers. He's so cute. Sometimes you can find them sitting on the national tree, the arawani, matching with its golden flowers. The birds of Venezuela can get really colorful or weird looking. You have everything from the weird Guinean cock of the rock that has an orange slice as a head to the yellow-knobbed curassow, sporting the jerry curls. Also kind of looks like me when I wake up in the morning. Actually, it looks like Paul when he wakes up in the morning.
More like me, actually. Yeah, more like me.
Remember how we talked about the tepui? Well, at the top of the tepui, you can find unique isolated species found nowhere else on Earth, like white-eared possums, long-tailed weasels, pale-throated sloths. There's even a dry sand dune area in the northwest side at the Médanos de Coro National Park, famous for their yellow-shouldered parrots. Otherwise, the list goes on and on and on. You can find giant anteaters, jaguars, capybaras, crabs eating foxes. Crab eating foxes.
The fox is eating the crabs.
Crabs eating oh my god! It's the biggest crab I've ever seen. It's literally a jungle out there. Much like my life right now, balancing work and 2 kids and occasionally showing up for these Geography Now episodes. Cheers!
Thank you, Caleb. Hang in there, buddy. In any case, to talk about the food, we have one of our Venezuelan geography peeps, Miguel, to fill in. Just remember, do not call humitas and ayacas tamales, even though admittedly they do look similar. Take it away, Miguel.
Hey everyone, I'm Miguel. I'm so sorry, Noah, but it is my time to talk about food. We Venezuelans are super proud of our food. Breakfast. One of the things you will find very often is the arepa. Before leaving our homes in the morning, we usually have 1 or 2 arepas with a cup of black coffee or café con leche. We also have cachitos de jamón, which is a nice savory pastry filled with ham. Otherwise, you might find perico, which is our own version of scrambled eggs with tomato and onion. We also have a version of an empanada that is made with the same dough of the arepa but fried. And you will find tequeños everywhere. And don't call them mozzarella sticks. That we eat it by hand with salsa de ajo, which is mayo with garlic sauce, or guasacaca, which is a Venezuelan version of guacamole made in a blender. You cannot talk about Venezuelan food without pabellón criollo. This is our national dish. Every region has their own way to make it, but it always includes beans, rice, shredded beef, and plátanos fritos. Now, on Christmas, we love things like hallaca, ensalada de gallina, pan de jamón, and pernil, which is a whole roasted pork leg. And for drinks, there's the liquor big three. Some of the other foods we have: pescado frito, asado negro, patacones, picandina, and yes, in some places we eat capybara. They're cute, but they're tasty. And finally, let's circle back to the most important dish of them all, the arepa. The arepa is a fat little corn cake that is used for everything. You can have it sweet, you can have it salty, you can make it like a sandwich, you can just break it. It is the best! And we invented it. So, as you can see, Venezuelan food is as varied as its people, and you will enjoy them all.
Thank you, Miguel. Well, the end of the segment. I don't have a fancy exit, so I will just say we've reached the end of the segment. But it is not the end of us.
That was weird, man. Thank you, Noah. Joanna, what's your favorite Venezuelan food?
The arepa, obviously.
The arepa. Well, speaking of arepas, there's actually a war going on between Venezuela and Colombia. It's called the Arepa War. Yeah.
All right, well, we invented it.
Actually, Colombia invented it.
Venezuela invented it, just get over it.
Colombia invented it.
Que Venezuela, carajo, Venezuela.
Have you seen Encanto? Have you seen the arepas in Encanto?
Oh, an animated movie is going to be your factual standard? Come on.
Colombia la inventó ya, punto. Se acabó.
Ay, no, mira, que es que Colombia no la inventó. Mira, mi esposo es colombiano y hasta él me ha dicho que la arepa es venezolana, ¿ok? Ahí está.
Punto,
Ahí
final.
está.
Well, whoever invented it, it's clearly delicious and an integral part of your culture. Let's discuss more on what makes a Venezuelan in the next segment. So, Joanna, what is a Venezuelan?
There's a saying in Venezuela that goes, ese baila hasta el himno nacional, like here she even dances the national anthem. And I think that is very much the spirit of a Venezuelan. Like, we know how to party, we know how to have a good time. You know, there's like this joie de vivre.
The joy of life.
The joy of life.
Yeah. Well put, that was intense.
Well, it's only gonna get more intense. But first, my favorite, another motion graphic.
Your favorite graphic. The motion kind.
The motion kind.
First of all, Venezuela has a population of about 28 million, and since crisis times, the country has seen a sharp decline in population, as many have fled the country. When asked for the Venezuelan census, the majority, at about 51% of the population, claims to be moreno, a term that is similar to the word mestizo, which means something like a person with mixed European, native, and sometimes maybe even black ancestry, but there's no way to fully gauge the exact degree. From there, the next largest group, at about 43%, claim to be blanco, or white, Venezuelans, with the largest backgrounds coming from the Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and Germans. From there, about 3% are Afro-Venezuelans, 2% are Amerindian, and the final 1% mostly belong to Asians like Chinese, Filipinos, Japanese, and Koreans.
So I know what you're thinking. Yes, we'll get to the whole complicated crisis thing. But first, before we get to that, we're going to cover the basics.
Okay, the Bolivar is the official currency, but nobody really uses it anymore. And as we mentioned, the dollar is the unofficially adopted currency now.
They use the types A and B plug outlets, and they drive on the right side of the road.
Spanish is the official language of Venezuela. However, Venezuelans have a very distinct Venezuelan accent.
Explain, Joanna.
We have this sort of Caribbean twang, and we don't really pronounce the S's. And instead of an S, we sort of sigh a lot. Yeah, like lo-o-o, we say lo-ho-ho.
Lo-ho-ho.
La joña.
La hawa.
La hawa. La hawa.
That was in your video.
That was in my video.
I remember that.
Good
yeah.
callback.
By the way, guys, check out her videos on YouTube.
Check it out.
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
And just one more thing. Explain, what is vaina?
Vaina is my favorite word. It's like the cardigan of words. It goes with everything. It's whatever you make of it. It's a thing. Like, that's a vaina. A party. Let's go to that vaina.
It's an adjective.
It's an adjective. It's just, it can be anything.
Go to her vaina at this vaina by vaina-ing.
You could have a sentence that is 90% the word vaina and, like, it would be acceptable.
It's like clay. You can shape it into anything.
You can shape it. That's a beautiful way to put it. Yeah.
So anyway, otherwise, the government of Venezuela recognizes more than 30 indigenous languages, mostly used by people in the Amazonas state.
And there are certain areas that have linguistic communities, like in La Colonia Tovar, they speak a dialect of German called Alemán Coloniero. And close to the border of Brazil, you might hear more Portuguese being spoken.
Religion. Somewhere around 88% of the country adheres to Christianity, mostly Catholic-based, whereas most of the Asian and Middle Eastern communities, like Lebanese, Syrian, Chinese, and Japanese, are either Muslim or Buddhist.
And interestingly enough, Venezuela is also the home to the largest Druze community outside of the Middle East, at about 60,000 100,000. And of course, a small community of Jews, which is why I'm here.
Okay, so now let's do this, the crisis and refugee thing. This is an insanely complicated topic that is not easily condensed, but let's try to give you the basics that you need to know.
For much of the 20th century, Venezuela was a thriving, stable, rich nation that many people were immigrating to. In fact, many people were coming into Venezuela as refugees during other conflict eras throughout Latin America.
So what happened, Joanna?
Oh, well, some might say the country started changing during the recession of the 80s and early 90s, but some might say it was the election of Chavez in 1998 and the Bolivarian Revolution, which started the Fifth Republic and the 27th constitution of the country since the independence.
You guys have had 27 constitutions.
You know, what we lack in economic stability, we make up for in a number of constitutions.
Yeah. Now this is the controversial part because you might get a wide range of responses when you ask Venezuelans what they think about all this, especially in regards to the whole Chavez thing. So Joanna, I've heard from some folk that Chavez, yes, he was charismatic in the beginning, you know, he appealed to the poor, and yes, in the beginning he and his party might have tried to do some good things like creating lots of initiatives for the poor. But then I also heard that, you know, there was the whole sending adversaries to jail and firing people from the PDVSA on live TV and taking over TV stations and censoring people, and it seems like all of this was an indication of the direction where things would be heading. Is that kind of accurate?
I would say that's accurate. You know, well, let's just say, you know, soon the economy tanked and grocery shelves were empty. People were leaving the country, especially educated professionals, which caused brain drain. In 2013, it had the highest homicide and kidnapping rate in the world. Then in 2016, Maduro substituted the Supreme Court. And then there was an economic emergency decree that was approved and relegated Maduro to the legislative and executive powers, effectively giving him powers of all three branches of government. Goodbye checks and balances. This is why Guaido stepped in as interim president for the opposition, but to this day, the whole thing is still going on, and it's just, but that's a condensed version.
Xanax break.
Yes.
Joanna rants. Check out her videos on YouTube. Yeah, we could get into all the multi-layered complicated variables that played into what followed after this, like how the government allocated the budget funds and how they initiated a new fiscal policy that they thought would work, or how they made a ton of new laws. Long story short, it ended in all those things that you've probably already seen in the news. Venezuela had a very noticeable change.
And a lot of people have said, hey, the situation, at least economically, has since cooled off since the, you know, dollarization. But, you know, we do have the biggest refugee crisis in the world, and there's still a lot of suppression and oppression of the people of Venezuela. So do with that what you will.
In a sense, this is kind of what makes up a Venezuelan, a person who kind of sees all of this and has to figure out a way to move forward.
Yes, and that's why in Venezuela you always hear the word resuelve, okay? You gotta figure it out. Resolver. People will open up a bodega on their house window or have a restaurant in their living room. They always have to figure it out because they have so many complications. They gotta be the masters of their
life.
You can't like just sit there and complain. You gotta figure it out. They trade, bargain, loan. Half of the people have freelance side jobs, and everyone knows a guy that can fix your appliance or plumbing, or, you know, whether they're licensed or not. You have to know how to circumvent crisis as a Venezuelan.
In that regard, though, I heard all this kind of also plays into Venezuelan humor, right?
Oh my gosh. Venezuelans will casually joke or talk about the most morbid things as if it's like the most normal thing in the world.
For example, hey, do you remember Isabella?
Isabella got shot in the leg or kidnapped or ransomed.
Oh, no, that's Isadora. Isabella's the one whose house burned down, and then, you know, she broke her arm while she was trying to escape.
Broken arm Isabella.
Yeah. So I was talking to her this morning, and, you know, while I was getting mugged, and her daughter wanted to give you these grapefruits.
Oh,
so,
broken arm Isabella.
Oh, she's the best.
Wow,
she's the best. I love that humor, though.
Everyone has some kind of story that involves some kind of crazy thing they've experienced, so it's just like normal.
In any case, there's a lot of things that we could talk about when it comes to the Venezuelan identity, and one thing that definitely plays into this is the sports that they play.
To talk about more on that, it's art!
With the sports part.
All right, everyone, you ready for some camel racing and buzkashi?
Art, this is not the Uzbekistan episode.
This is not, all right. All right, so I guess this is sports of Venezuela. So it has been said that the two biggest sports in Venezuela are baseball and beauty pageants. That's right. But aside from that, as of 2023, Venezuela racked up 21 Olympic medals. 3 of them are gold, 1 in boxing, 1 in women's triple jump, and the other, believe it or not, is fencing. But none of those sports even pales in comparison to the #1 sport Venezuela spends most of their time focusing on, baseball. Venezuela is one of the 4 Latin American baseball countries. Technically, Puerto Rico is considered as like the 5th member, but whatever. Throughout history, nearly 400 Venezuelan players have been recruited into the MLB. Some of the most popular and notable famous players that you have probably heard of include these guys right here. I mean, wait, out of that list, I know Miguel Cabrera.
You know Miguel Cabrera?
Yeah.
Who does he play for?
I forgot.
Miguel Cabrera.
I know, right? Miguel Cabrera.
Miguel Cabrera.
The point is, he's Venezuelan and we've taken way too much time on him. Everyone knows the rivalry between these two teams and they go crazy. Baseball is so rooted in their culture that they even have phrases that they use everyday life that are baseball oriented, like en tres y dos, meaning you're on thin ice and this is your last chance. Or me ponchaste, meaning I have no clue what you're saying. Now, of course, Venezuelans do like football to some extent, but as of today, they're the only country from the CONMEBOL nations who have never qualified for a World Cup. This, of course, might change with new expansion rule for FIFA 2026. Let's see what happens. At the time of filming this episode, it hasn't happened yet, so for those of you who have traveled into the future or from the future, and you know the answer to this, please let us know in the comments. Fun fact, one Venezuelan cross country, I keep wanting to say cross-dresser. Cross-dressing skier. This keeps getting worse. Cross-country skier Adrian Solano was funded by the GoFundMe campaign by a Finnish television host to participate in the 2017 FIS Nordic World Ski Championship. And he had never seen snow before. Oh my God. Oh.
Too many words.
Too much crossing of words.
Words are not your thing.
Yeah. Well, on that awkward note, it's time for me to go. So thank you guys for having me. And I'm going to get back to Uzbekistan. So bye, guys.
Thank you, Art.
So yeah, baseball and beauty pageants, Venezuelans are competitive.
Also, I heard there's a weird thing you guys do in Venezuela. Like, you give weird names to your kids. Is that true? Like,
the names are so freaking weird. Okay, I'm gonna give you some examples of names I've heard. Nebraska, Taj Mahal, Elvis Presley, Walt Disney World.
and also, don't you guys like take English words and make them into names too sometimes?
Like yes I do, kiss me, Juan 100.
Juan 100.
Yes.
Yeah, also, didn't like the Venezuelan government like approve of a superhero based off of the president and his wife, and they fight like monsters and stuff, and like they even made it into an action figure that they sell to kids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, there's that and a lot of other interesting facts about Venezuelan culture. And to cover that topic, here is Hannah with the culture stuff.
Hi guys, I'm back and I have a baby. This is Robin, Geography Now, baby.
Does look like Ian, dang.
Maybe Ian. All right. Okay, so we're gonna go down the list of some things you guys, the Venezuelans, suggested we mention in regards to Venezuelan culture. And I'm gonna read it off the teleprompter. First thing, you wanna point to something in Venezuela? You use your lips. Imitate. What does that mean? Second, speaking of lips, beauty is a whole industry in Venezuela. Like, it's not even funny. It's a viable career path that women take very seriously. And there are multiple training facilities that focus on pageantry. There's even a documentary you can watch called Beauty Factory. This, of course, makes sense when you consider that they have won more international beauty pageant titles than any other country in the world. They even have the only back-to-back Miss Universe winners. Another thing they are known for, their nicknames for regional peoples. Gochos, the hard-working country folk. Llaneros are the tough, fast-talking cowboys. And Maracuchos are people from the Zulia area with a no-nonsense confidence, and they can party pretty hard. I think I could get along with these Zulians. In fact, Zulians are probably the most distinct cultural people in Venezuela. They even at one point flirted with the idea of independence. Side note, the Caribbean coast is where much of the Afro-Venezuelans can be found. In the Yaracuy area, Venezuela has a branch of Santeria that worships Maria Leonza, one of 3 deities who has the ability to talk to animals, and she also rides on a magic tapir. The most colorful event would probably be during Corpus Christi, where you can see the dancing devils, Diablos Danzantes. Did I say that right?
You actually did, yeah.
Wow.
Danzante.
It is inscribed by UNESCO as a heritage of humanity. Otherwise, Venezuelans have lots of accolades to boast about. For example, so obviously malaria is a really bad thing, and Venezuela was one of the first countries to eradicate malaria in Latin America. Whoop whoop! Also, Dr. Juancito Convit developed the leprosy vaccine, and Felix Pefano founded treatments for various tropical diseases, which no one wants those. In the arts, you have famous writers like these guys, Romulo Gallegos, probably being the most notable one. So many painters like these guys, Arturo Michelena, probably having the most renowned career. And in cinema, it is said that the Venezuelan golden era of film was in the 70s and 80s. The film When I Want to Cry, I Don't Cry by Mauricio Wallerstein was a huge box office hit, and many say it was the beginning of the new Venezuelan cinema movement. And of course, you can't have movies without a film score. And with that, we now go to an actual Venezuelan to explain the music of Venezuela. Say hello to Enoch.
Gracias, panita, and hola, ¿qué tal? Mi nombre es Enoch, and they also call me Enochian, and that is my artist name. Venezuelan music. So, if you want the shortest summary of the famous Venezuelan sounds, this is what you need to know. Number 1, Alma Llanera, which is the second national anthem.
Why is it the second one? You know?
It's just a good anthem. I don't know. It's been practiced in Venezuela for many years. Number 2, Caballo Viejo. Number 3, Moliendo Café. Then on the east side and the coast, you have calypso and tambore music. You should definitely see how the women dance to the tambores. It looks something like... Okay, never mind. I'm not the best dancer.
Oh, you almost had that.
Just
come on.
Search it online. You'll see it. Then you have the Zulia region where my family is from, Maracaibo. And we also have Christmas music that was invented in Maracaibo, Venezuela, called Las Gaitas. Gustavo Aguado. A huge influence in what is simply called guacos, the innovators of Las Gaitas. Alright, even though there's a lot of African Caribe influence in Venezuela, most Venezuelans will say the national music and dance comes from Los Llanos, the flatlands of the center of the country. Like the national dance, the joropo. Everybody knows Simón Diaz, aka Tío Simón, who is probably the biggest name in musical llanera. And of course, the best for last, my music. Go check it out at Enochian right here at the bottom. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not famous yet. But for real, these are the styles that every Venezuelan will point you towards if you ask them about Venezuelan music. We even have a public orchestra system called El Sistema, which gives instruments to children for free if they cannot afford them, which is really nice. It was used as a program to unite people all around music and help young people get out of poverty and crime. And no instrument is more iconic than the Venezuelan cuatro, which looks like a small guitar, but it's a little different with its own technique and its own sound. But in the modern contemporary sense, Venezuela is still pumping out lots of mainstream music. We have notable artists like Elena Rose, Danny Ocean, Jerry D, con el canción Caracas en el 2000. Ah, qué chévere fueron las cosas cuando el bolo estaba a mil. Oh, and let's not forget myself, of course. El Enochian, one of the latest originals, Lo Pasamos Bien, El Remix.
Guys, seriously, check him out. He's got good stuff. If you like, music, and he does this stuff. He knows his stuff.
Bueno, gracias a todos, and I hope you really enjoyed checking out the music of Venezuela. Thank you, guys. Well, that was quite the summary on what it means to be a Venezuelan.
And it didn't even scratch the surface. There's so much more, but this video is already long enough as it is. I mean, I talked a lot. Venezuelans talk a lot. Here we are.
But we're not done. To see how the rest of the world sees Venezuelans, let's go to the final segment. What is it, Joanna?
The friend zone.
So, like all countries, Venezuela can't do everything alone. They do have to interact with other people in the world.
And with Venezuela, the story of diplomacy gets kind of interesting because it kind of depends on whether you look at it from the political on paper side or the everyday Venezuelan citizens and diaspora side of things.
Let's explain more in something Joanna really loves.
A motion graphic.
The best type of graphic.
It's because it's emotion.
So first off, let's talk about on paper. Since the Chavez years, the Venezuelan government has shifted their leanings towards nations that have similar political ideologies. In 2006, Russia signed a nearly $3 billion arms deal and restructured their debt with Venezuela, declaring numerous times that they would use their UN Security Council status to block any resolutions that aim to suspend Venezuela. In addition, Venezuela became the third nation to officially recognize the independence of Russian-backed breakaway republics of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. On that note, China has been a huge lender, mostly for development projects in exchange for future oil shipments as well. They even launched their first joint satellite in 2008, Venesat-1. The only issue is, much of the relationship depends on how well Venezuela can keep up with their payments, as recently they've been defaulting quite a few times, and as of 2023, the debt is estimated to be somewhere around $10 billion. Regardless, like Russia, they've expressed similar concerns in regards to using their UN Security Council votes in favor for Venezuela. Closer to home, you could also look at the ALBA Alliance, a 10-country member alliance including Cuba, Nicaragua, and Bolivia. These 4 countries are the closest ideologically in their political leanings, and they typically work closely together. Chavez even described Fidel Castro as his mentor, and Nicaragua's Daniel Ortega and Chavez were also good friends. Cuba is also a major source of importing medical, education, and engineer professionals to Venezuela. If you ask the everyday Venezuelans and Venezuelan diaspora, though, it really depends because there are so many ties all over the world. Some might say Spain, and more specifically the Canary Islands. In fact, Venezuela is sometimes called the 8th Canary Island, as many of the people from Venezuela are descended from Canary Islanders. And today, much of the Venezuelan culture and dialect is similar to that of the Canary Islands. Most Venezuelans will give a country that is usually within the Americas or Caribbean. Many Venezuelans ended up migrating to places like the Dominican Republic, Peru, Chile, Ecuador, Argentina, Uruguay. I've heard good reports of Venezuelans feeling happy and welcomed in most of these countries. Many, of course, have migrated to the USA, specifically to Miami. The USA and Venezuela used to have a close relationship in the 20th century, but then it all kind of deteriorated once the Chavez years came up. But in the 2015 Obama years, a direct channel of communication was established, beginning talks for a possible re-establishing of relations. However, when it comes to their best friend, almost every Venezuelan I've talked to has said one country, Colombia. No one understands Venezuelans more than Colombians. When Colombia had a crisis, Venezuela took in Colombian refugees with open arms. Likewise, Colombia returned the favor and has taken in more Venezuelan refugees than any other nation. They share so many cultural nuances, they intermarry and have kids with each other so frequently that it's kind of like a blur and hard to even tell where the Colombia starts and the Venezuela ends. They love each other.
All right, and with that, in conclusion, obviously, Joanna, you are the Venezuelan. I'm going to give this to you. I am out of here.
What? Okay. Venezuela's in the news a lot. There's political instability, there's economic, all these things. But Venezuela is a beautiful country with so much diversity and culture and beauty. And honestly, the nicest, coolest people you can imagine. Sometimes when you look at a place, you gotta forget about its illness and just look at the person behind the illness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like a colorful hurricane.
That is what my therapist calls me.
Well, Joanna, it's such an honor to have you. Seriously,
Oh my God.
I've been in contact with you for like what, 5-6 years or something.
You wrote to me 5 years ago.
Like I knew she had to be the one for this episode. It's crazy. So
Here we are.
Such an honor to have you in this episode. And Joanna, what's you want to introduce the next country episode?
Yeah, it's Good Morning Vietnam.
Cheers. Stay cool. Stay tuned.